If you are 40 and over and you are still waiting to be married, you feel frustrated, you feel stuck, you feel like it'll never happen for you, then this is the video for you. You definitely want to stick around for this conversation. All right, ladies, so this video is actually as a result of a request that came from one of the ladies on the channel, and you know who you are. I really wanted to give you a shout out by name, but because I did not ask for permission, I'm not going to do it. So thank you for making the request, and I hope this blesses you, answers your questions, as well as bless and answers the questions of other ladies that are on the channel. So the request was, could I do a video ministering really to the ladies who are 40 and over, who are still waiting, might feel frustrated still, trying to figure out how to get this thing to work, or maybe why it's not working. So, and this was a really good question because I've been having a lot of dialogue with some of the ladies on the channel, and I see them tripping over the same things that I tripped over, and some the same thing that other ladies have tripped over that I minister to offline, right? And the number one thing is this thing called faith. Now, I want you to stick with me. You might think, oh, I've heard that before. Okay, faith comes by hearing. I want to share some things with you that you might have already heard before, but maybe some other people have not heard before. And I want to put things in a maybe a different context. Okay, so that's going to be my goal. So the one thing that we have to remember is that God created us spirit, soul, and body. There are spiritual laws and there are natural laws. We can be really, really developed in the natural things, right? I mean, we are so in tune with how we feel, what we think, what we see, what we touch, and different things like that. But I know from experience, it really takes effort, consistency, and faith to really operate in spiritual things. So because we really exist in the natural realm and the spiritual realm, there's laws that govern the natural, there are laws that govern the spiritual realm. And so I first want to define what a law is. So a law is a body of rules of action or conduct prescribed by controlling authority, by a controlling authority and having binding legal force. Let me read that one more time. A law is a body of rules or actions or conduct prescribed by a controlling authority and having binding legal force. Now, I want to bring that into I want to give a practical example. Now, we all understand that there's a law of gravity. What goes up must come down. That law exists whether we believe it or not, right? Somebody can say, well, I don't believe in the law of gravity. I'm going to go up to this 7-story building and I'm going to drop off and I bet you I will float. Okay. Go up to the 7th floor, jump and see whether or not that person floats. Won't happen because the law is indiscriminate. It doesn't need for you to believe it to be in operation. So, and as I was really thinking about this message and preparing for it, I really was thinking about how years ago, I really, really had a thing about flying. Like, well, it started with I just didn't prefer to fly. And then I had a really, really bad experience on a plane where I became very fearful of flying. And so then, you know, God dealt with me about fear, long story, to make it short. I came to a place where I was going to fly despite my fear. And God really brought me to a place that I was able to do that, really didn't have the anxiety and different things like that. But one of the things that I noticed that whenever I would get on a plane, the thing that I struggled with was the laws that I understood, right? I'm sitting on this plane and I understand that this plane weighs tons. Okay, this plane is heavy. And I would sit there and I would have to cast down the imagination of how in God's name is this thing staying in the air? And there's this law of gravity, you know, like what comes up must come down. But, and what I do understand is that there is a law called, what is it? A law of lift and thrust. that supersedes the law of gravity. There is a law that supersedes the law of gravity. And so while yes, for sure, there is the law of gravity, indiscriminate, doesn't need you to believe it in order for it to be in operation. There is another law that supersedes that this plane can go up and it won't come down until it is, controlled by the pilot to come down when it's supposed to come down. Now, why did I use that example? Because in these natural laws, right? So when you think about, I'm whatever age, I'm 40 plus. I got this going on. It looks like this won't happen for me. I look around and I don't see a man. And, all of these things in the natural that you consider, as it relates to it can't happen. I'm too old. Ain't nobody gonna marry me. Maybe, my health isn't as good as it used to be. And, I'm not my youthful self. Honey, listen. There is a law called faith that supersedes anything that you got going on in your life, right? So just like the law of thrust and lift supersedes the law of gravity, the law of faith will supersede anything that you have going on in your life, and the enemy stands it up in your face and says, this won't happen for you. And this is why, this is why, this is why, and this is why. Okay. So one of the greatest examples of how God is not moved by, deterred by, or intimidated by our natural limitations, not only is it because he's God, but he gave us an example that we can look to really give us hope, right? So I'm not going to read these scriptures in detail. I'm going to call them out. I would love and encourage you to go look it up for yourself, because that's the thing. It's really for you to know the word for yourself, right? So I want us to look at Abraham and Sarah. Many of us know the story. I want to tell it again. Hopefully, I'm going to put a different spin on it to bring everything into context. Now, the Bible talks about Abraham was the father of faith. But a lot of people don't realize Abraham's name was originally Abram. Abram had a hard time believing God for a promise that was made to him, right? Abraham was 75 years old when God appeared to him and said, and I think it was Genesis 12:2. Abraham was 75 years old. God showed up and he said, I want you to leave your country, leave everybody behind. I want you to go out and I'll show you where you want to go. And he made him a promise. And he said, after you go out, he told him two things, that he will make him a great nation. He will make out of him a great nation, and that he would bless him, make his name great, and that he would be a blessing to others. That was in Genesis 12:2, 75 years old. Then in Genesis 13:16, God showed up again and he expounded on the promise that he gave him. And he said in Genesis 16:6, I will make your offsprings like the dust of the earth, so that if anyone can count the dust, then your offspring could then be counted. Right? Abraham, 75 years old, gave him a promise. Now, he was old. His wife was up in age. Nothing was popping at 75. So God showed up in Genesis 12:2, gave him that promise. God showed back up in Genesis 13:16, the promise still had not come to pass. God reiterated, he restated the promise that he already made, right? Then in Genesis 15:2, it says, well, this is what I wrote. These are my notes. Him and his wife, Sarah, waited long enough. Oh, okay. This is what happened. Genesis 15:2, Abraham and Sarah were still waiting on the promise, had not come to pass. Just like us, got frustrated. They were waiting. It didn't happen. I know, I have a great idea. Go sleep with my concubine, impregnate her. We'll take the baby, hold it up. This is the promise. Well, God shows up and in Genesis 17, because that was not God's original plan. God told him, I'm going to make out of you a great nation. That is you and your wife, Sarah, right? So Abraham, still frustrated, God shows up, Genesis 17, and he restates the promise again, right? And so Abraham says, well, God, what are you going to give me? See that I go childless. I have this heir, in here. He was talking about Ishmael. I have this child talking about Ishmael. He's going to be my heir. God said, not so. That's not what I said. I said, and he restated again, I said that I was going to make a great nation out of you. And that nation is going to come out of you and your wife, Sarah. Now, Abram, he's looking at, well, God, I am so sorry. I'm old. My stuff really ain't working. Ain't no Viagra. My wife is past childbearing years. The stuff may be a little dry right about now in more than one place. I just don't see it happening. And it's in this chapter 17, that God teaches Abraham faith. I'm sorry, God teaches Abram faith. Because Abram had the promise. And this is that thing that I'm talking about when I hear people say, what God has for you is for you, and it's going to happen anyway. That's not true, and it's not Bible. And you can look at these scriptures to prove it. Abraham had the promise. Abraham was 75 years old. And it was actually in chapter 17 that Abraham is now 100 years old. So that's 25 years later, right? Still don't have the promise. So God, in his infinite wisdom, he knew what needed to be done. So he said, okay. He restated the promise, and then he changed his name. He changed his name from Abram to Abraham, right? And so in biblical times, when people would name their children, the names that they gave their children were very significant, right? So they just weren't making up stuff and just, oh, this sounds cute. No, the names were very significant. So when God changed Abram's name from Abram to Abraham, the name Abraham meant father of nations. It meant, let me make sure, no, a father of a multitude. And it also did mean a father of nations as well, but a father of a multitude. So now when Abraham was going out in the community and somebody said, Abraham, where do you want me to put the sheep? He hears father of nations, father of many, right? Father of a multitude. Where do you want me to put the sheep? Hey, Abraham, father of a multitude, father of a multitude, father of a multitude. He kept hearing that father of a multitude being echoed in his ear every time somebody called his name. And do you know that from the time that God showed up in Genesis 12:2, he was 75 years old, till God showed up that third time to reiterate the promises that he made, that he would make a nation come out of him. He was now 100 years old, 25-year difference, right? That when God changed his name from Abram to Abraham, do you know that the promised child, Isaac, showed up in 12 months? 12 months, ladies. Why is that? Because God showed Abraham a faith principle. Faith comes by hearing, right? So why is this important? Because a lot of times we think that we are operating in faith when really we're operating in hope. And I've said before, hope is important, right? Hope is the goal setter. Hope is out in the distance, right? Hoping that it moves closer and closer. When you go back and you look at scripture, whenever God spoke of promises, he spoke in terms generally as if they already were, right? Not as if they're going to happen. Now faith is, right? Now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. right? Now faith. So when I think about this, I actually lived this, right? So I want to give you a short testimony. When I married my husband, he already had two children. I had two stepchildren. One passed away a couple of years ago. He was 35. So now I have one. But when my husband and I got married, he had two children already. I did not want children. I was satisfied. So it was shortly after my husband and I got married. And let me just step back a little bit. My family was bothered that I really didn't want children. I had godchildren. My mother was bothered. My brother would call and he was like, Nat, he calls me Nat. And I think at that time did he have any children at that? No, he didn't, because he got married after me. He didn't even have children at that time. But he definitely desired to be married, and he definitely wanted children. And so he would always call and encourage me, you really want to have children, you just don't know what you're missing out on. My girlfriends who did have children, Cynthia, it's this wonderful thing. And ladies, I would be looking at them just straight face. Honey, I had zero desire for children. And I was content with that. I did not feel at that time like something was missing in my life. Like I didn't have a biological clock at that time. I literally just did not desire children. And there was nothing wrong with that. There are some women who might desire to be married, but they don't want children. There's nothing wrong with that. There are some women who don't desire to be married. There is nothing wrong with that, right? So I didn't see anything wrong with it. So anyway, to make a long story short, I have all these people in my ear telling me this thing that I'm missing out on and whatever, did not faze me. Until one day, see, the Bible says that Jesus is the author and the finisher of our faith. You cannot exercise faith for something you don't desire, right? So God sowed a seed in my heart for desire to have a child. And like I said, I'm really just going to give like these bullet points. If you guys want me to expound on some things later, leave it in the comments. I'll definitely do that. Shoot me an email. So God sowed a seed in my heart, and I began to desire to have a child. Talked to my husband. At that time, he was not in agreement. And I really had to be fair and honest with my husband too, because even though I was kind of feeling some kind of way, I had to remember that when we got married, we were both in agreement that we weren't going to have any more children. So as that desire began to burn brighter and brighter on the inside of me, I went to God and I said, listen, God, we're not in agreement. I understand. In all fairness, we agreed. So if this is something that you have for me, you're going to have to change his heart. I didn't browbeat him, none of that. Make a long story short, God changed my husband's heart. So this all happened, I think, within the first year and a half of us being married. Got pregnant immediately after my husband's heart was changed, and I had an ectopic pregnancy. Had to have emergency surgery. That was the first time I was ever pregnant. Very traumatic for me. Just the whole losing of the baby and the major surgery that went with that. So after that, had multiple miscarriages. My womb just could not carry a baby. So later I found out it was because in my sinfulness, honeys, I had gotten an STD, and I think it was trichomonas or something like that. I thought it was a yeast infection. It was not, and it had really damaged my reproductive organs, my uterus, my ovaries, all that good stuff. So anyway, I could not have children. I was barren. So here I am, and when my husband and I got married, I think I was 32. So I was in my 30s, right? So here I am barren. My womb is not able to carry a child, and that's my dog. Sandy, go sit down. Sorry, ladies. My womb was not able to carry a child. So here I am. God has put this desire in my heart to have a child, and now my husband is in agreement. We're trying, but my body is not producing it. So to make a long story short, I went through some depression and just that whole thing, when Mother's Day would come around, I was not rejoicing. I would be just so sad and just so depressed, and like, what do I do with this thing? And so got into the word, and I began reading the story of Hannah, right? And if you've never read that story, that is one of my favorite stories. And so Hannah was barren too. She could not have a child. And so I could really teach that thing. That is just one of my favorites. But anyway, to make a long story short, God remembered Hannah. Hannah went to the temple, and she cried out to the Lord one day, and she made God a promise that if he would give her a child, she would give that child back to him, right? And that is Samuel. And so I remember reading that one day, and I closed the book, and I said to the Lord, I said, God, if you would give me children. Now, I have my stepchildren, love my stepchildren, have a great relationship with my stepchildren, but I wanted a baby out of my own womb, right? I said, God, if you will give me a child, just like Hannah, I would give that child back to you. And I rested, right? And so even with that declaration and that promise that I made to God, it was a process to bring that thing to pass. And let me tell you, so this is, and even though God had already started teaching me faith, right? But this was another level of faith that I needed to really operate in. I was operating in some other, lower levels of faith, but in this situation, this was my impossible, right? I'm barren. I've had over 6 miscarriages. My body demonstrated to me that it was not going to produce a baby from everything that I saw. So to make a long story short, my husband and I were able to adopt a newborn baby from the hospital at zero cost. Her name is Hannah. But I want to even unpack that just a little bit more for you to really bring home this point of Abraham and Sarah going from not being able to believe the promise, God teaching them faith, and then within 12 months, the promise was able to manifest. So understanding some things, and God is now teaching me this next level of faith. This is the one thing that I understood when I made that declaration to God. I needed to get in faith, right? So the Bible says that faith without works is dead. So I started thinking, okay, so what is going to be my point of faith, my demonstration, my acts that I can put with this thing that I desire and that I'm getting ready to get in faith for. So what I started doing was every time I got paid, I would go buy the baby something, right? So I wasn't really set on girl or boy at this time. And I take that back. I was set on a boy, and his name was going to be Yahshua, right? And so I started buying a bunch of baby boy stuff. And then one day in prayer, God said to me, it's going to be a girl. And I said, a girl? I said, okay. Now, I want you to keep in mind, I'm not pregnant. There is no evidence, right, that I can put it wasn't like I had a positive pregnancy test. This is me getting in faith. So God said to me, now mind you, I bought all this baby stuff. God said to me it was going to be a girl. I said, a girl? Well, I'm not trying to be funny. I had gotten to a point where I was in baby boy mode, right? I was in, I wanted this baby boy to come first, and he was going to be a big brother to his, to the sister, and he would be able to protect honey. Okay. So I had to shift my thinking and my expectation. So now I have to get in faith for this baby girl. So I had this tote. I had already had my little faith tote that I had all this little baby boy stuff in it. So I went and got another tote because I haven't given up on baby boy, but now I have to shift because God said it's going to be a girl. So, okay. So I went and I bought another tote, and I start now every week. Now I'm buying baby girl stuff. So because baby girl wasn't on my mind, baby girl didn't have a name. So I thought about it. got the little baby books. I'm, thinking about it, praying about it. And then I said, I'm going to name her Hannah, because Hannah, Jesus, Hannah so represented my story. So every time I got paid, I would go to the store and I would buy something for Hannah, right? Now, another faith principle, faith speaks. So I started telling everybody about Hannah. And so much so, I remember somebody saying, "Are you pregnant?" I said, "Not yet." I talked about Hannah as you would have thought that I was pregnant, had a positive pregnancy test, all that. Whenever I would talk about Hannah, I always talked or referred to her in present tense. Why is this important? Because a lot of times when you hear women talking about their husbands, he's always out in hope. He's never in faith, because faith is right now, right? The Bible says that when you believe that you receive it, then you shall have it, right? So it got to the point, literally, and ladies, I am not making this up, that people would refer to Hannah as if she already was in existence. I remember people would even call me up and say, "Hey, Cynthia, a friend of mine, they have these girl baby clothes and they were giving them away. And I thought about Hannah. Did you want them?" I'm like, "Great, yes, thank you so much." I was buying Hannah onesies, little clothes, different things. And the reason I did that, because it kept my faith engaged, right? Faith is never at rest. So now I'm operating in a spiritual principle that I am putting the pressure on my natural circumstances in order to get that to change. What was my natural circumstances? I'm barren, don't have a baby. Okay. So now I'm getting ready to speed this up. To make a long story short, I was working in this one place, and this lady and her husband, they were in the process of adopting a baby from, I think it was Guatemala. And they were spending their life savings of $45,000. And I just remember thinking, because even when we had gone through fertility treatments and different things like that, that didn't yield anything. I started looking at adoption. And the one thing I said, "Lord, I don't want no baby on credit." What did I mean? I didn't want a monthly bill that we had to be committed to, whether it was through adoption. Because let me tell you something, just like this woman that I was working with, and they were spending $45,000. Okay. The baby that they were getting, well, the child that they were getting, I think was like 18 months, right? So they were in that whole process, whatever that takes, in another country to bring the baby or whatever. So to make a long story short, my husband, my stepdaughter, well, I don't want to give too many details. Let me just say this. And I'm saying this because I want to respect somebody else's privacy, okay? We were connected with a family that, for their own personal reasons, were looking for a family to adopt their child. Had many inquiries, many. They were even connected to an adoption agency the adoption agency was about to fly them to another state, house them until, as she progressed in the pregnancy, have the baby there, take applicants, the baby would be adopted. But she started looking for somebody, not just she, they're married, started looking for somebody to adopt their baby. Reached out to my husband, okay? And he was like, "Absolutely." But then at the time, there was a relative that was interested in adopting the baby. And I remember even when my husband called to tell me that something hit me, right? Because disappointment is trying to set in, right? Because those are real emotions. And so once it hit, I had to shake it off, right? Because this one thing I knew, it wasn't a matter of if, it was just a matter of when. And honey, I felt like the promise was in the neighborhood. So to make a long story short, that fell through. And we were able to adopt this baby. And not only that, ladies, at zero cost. And we didn't do like, oh, let's just do this agreement type thing. I'm like, nope, nope, nope. It needs to be legal. My husband knew of this. He had a relationship with this priest, right? This Catholic priest. And he knew that we were in the process of adopting, and we were kind of looking for like a lawyer to legalize it and stuff like that. So he tells my husband, he'll say, oh yeah, go see, this person. I'm gonna make a phone call. So we show up at this law firm, and ladies, listen. I'm already trying to clear my throat when I show up at the building, okay? Because it looks like these people are charging every bit of $300 an hour. Okay. So we go into this building, we go into the law firm, had an appointment, we sit down and we're talking to these people. And I'm a very bottom line type of person. And so this lawyer, she's talking to us, and I'm just gonna be honest, I didn't hear nothing this lady said. Because my question was, how much is this gonna cost? Right? So to make a long story short, she gets to it. She finishes all this stuff that she needs to tell us. And so I say, well, okay, well, I just need to know before we go any further, how much is this going to cost? And so she looks taken back. She's like, zero. When Mother so-and-so calls and asks us for a favor, we're just so delighted to just be of assistance to her. And so she called, this is a favor to her. So this is going to cost you nothing. Tell me Jesus won't do it, right? And so not only that, now remember, I said, God, we don't want to have no baby with a bill. So even the job that I was working at the time, we had an adoption reimbursement, right, program. So even the money that we had to come out of pocket for, because we had to do like the home study and some of like we had to pay for the home study and like the court fees and stuff like that. And so even the money that we had to come out of pocket for that, we got reimbursed for. And so while I'm working with this lady, and thank God that they had the money to do it. Okay, so they had their blessing. They were believers too. Got this baby, 18 months from Guatemala. But God was just as gracious to us that we were able to adopt this brand new baby by the name of Hannah, who was known by everybody before she was literally even conceived in the womb of her birth mother, right? And brought her home at zero cost. Why am I telling this story? Because just like Abram had to be taught faith by the changing of his name, I had to be taught faith as well. And just like Abraham received what Abram could not receive in 24 or 25 years, Abraham was able to receive it in 12 months. And a lot of times we get stuck in hope and we're spinning our wheels and we're spinning our wheels. And now the enemy is causing us to accuse God. And it seems like it's never going to happen for us. And now we're over 40 and we're over 50 and all these things. And we feel like it's a dead end. And you have to remember, just like the law of lift and thrust supersedes the law of gravity, the law of faith supersedes your age, supersedes your failed relationships, supersedes whatever lie that you have laying dormant on the inside of you that says that you're too old, it won't happen, it'll never happen. Look around at everybody else. Look at what happened the last time. Faith does not consider any of those things. And I just really wanted to encourage you ladies. And listen, again, this is not just for if you're 50 plus. The law of faith will work at any age, in any area, under any circumstance. And the one reason that I really, and I shouldn't say the one of many reasons that I really love to tell this story about Abraham, and guess what? God not only changed Abram's name to Abraham, he also changed Sarah's name from Sarai, right? Why is this important? A lot of times when we look at the Bible, when we read the Bible, we think, well, let me just talk about myself. Another mental shift that I had to make, an adjustment on the inside of me, when I would read the Bible, I would read it as if it was fiction, right? And I had to come to a point where I read it and realized these were real people just like me. That was their life at that point. They had the same discouragement, disappointment. They were looking around at the natural things and it looked impossible for them. They had the same feelings that we have. So I had to train myself to quit looking at reading the Bible like it's some novel, some fiction. No, these are real people. And what God wanted to demonstrate is he is not moved by our limitations. He is not moved by the deadness of our wounds. He is not moved by our past failed relationships. He's not moved by our age. Listen, ladies, I am 50, okay? I am 5 and 0. Gravity, okay, has taken place in my life in some other areas, okay? And so sometimes we can look at it, especially as women, like, I don't have the body that I had when I was, in my 20s and honey, me either, And so I say that to say, God ain't moved by that. God is not moved by the lie of it ain't no good men out here. Honey, that is a lie too. Another teaching. But I just wanted to encourage you, ladies. Don't give up. There literally just might be some adjustments in you that need to be made, just like Abraham had to make adjustments in him. And while it seems like it's been 15 years, it's been 20 years, just like Abraham couldn't receive in 25 years, but Abram could receive in 12 months. I dare you to make some adjustments on the inside of you. And I guarantee you, when you learn how to operate in this law of faith, it will supersede everything you ever thought was impossible. Amen. All right, ladies, I pray that this was a blessing to you. I pray that you got something out of it. Thank you again, madam, who requested this video. I hope this answered your question, and hopefully it blessed you and will bless others that answer their question as well. We've been having some really good feedback on the channel. Please, again, comment. Let me know what you think. Don't forget to share this video if you think that it might be a blessing to somebody else. And ladies, I will see you in the next video. Be blessed.